We continue our discussion on the broader impact of corruption on ordinary people, the state, and the erosion of trust in democracy. And joining us now to discuss the morality of corruption and strategies to overcome the rot will be the former Statistician General Andile Nomlala, who will be joining us in just a moment. But here in studio, we've got the Black Management Forum President, Andile Nomlala. Andile, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for coming through. You know, when you look at corruption, and certainly this is something that has once again come into the spotlight when we look at PPE corruption, but certainly this is nothing new. But now when you hear citizens like the ones who was talking to earlier on, who are just talking about how it has an impact, a direct impact in their lives, particularly on the projects that are not being finished, or when it comes to, you know, some of the white elephants as they're describing them in their communities. Certainly it does look like it's stealing progress and the development of these communities.
Thank you, Bongiwe, and thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and good evening to your viewers. Look, Bongiwe, maybe let's start on this part of Bongiwe Zwane, for instance, today. He's clearly a common tag that is still standing as an MP of our country. Now, if you have that picture, and you reference that picture to his former boss in the Free State, Mr. Ace Magashule. And you can see he, even himself is a very strange breed type of a black leader in a very crucial or an important organization of ANC's magnitude. Both those characters, shady characters I must say, without a shadow of doubt, are occupying critical positions, be it as MPs or as Secretary General of a ruling party. Now you have the very same ruling party saying that we are prepared to deal with corruption, and they task an Ace Magashule to be the person that keeps the members of the organization, who most of them, be it at municipality level, provincial level, and national level, even the president of the ANC actually admitted, which was the right thing to do, that ANC as a government and its members are accused, number one, when it comes to corruption. Now, if you expect that ungashi ibhokwe nekhaphetshu to say that the ibhokwe must jonga ikhaphetshu in the case of Ace Magashule, and you expect a plausible outcome, it's a joke. It's a joke. The Bongiwe Zwane's testimony at Zondo Commission this afternoon or earlier today, it's a shocking experience, Bongiwe, and I don't know why those thugs are still walking the streets. I mean, it's just perplexing.
And Andile, on that, I mean, he still is yet to, of course, ventilate what exactly happened there, possibly in the Zondo Commission. So you do not even trust that when he comes, there could be some, you know, as he has been saying, that proof will definitely come someday.
No, the commission, Bongiwe, look, let's deal with this in a very methodical manner. In an ideal world, when you have a person, even if we have a commission that is taking place, but you have a person with many, many witnesses, that whether the Zondo Commission could have unearthed, or even a court of law could have unearthed, and you prefer to start with the commission. We support the commission as the BMF. We think it's necessary. But there are glaring low-hanging fruits of common thugs that goes and parade themselves at the Zondo Commission with multiples of months of consequences that would come, investigations that would come after. Why don't you just drag those thugs tomorrow to a court of law and run that process so that you convict them and you get rid of them? And then the state capture itself can manage the systemic occurrence of the state capture, not deal with, because we're giving these people audience, we're giving them platforms. And I understand the patience of the judiciary, but the state institutions, which is what the President of the Republic has been talking about, like the NPA, the Hawks, the SIU, really, Bongiwe, they need to be doing something. These guys have assets. These guys are paying lawyers with stolen money. Those people by now should have, there's enough low-hanging evidence, even if that guy has stolen a 5,000 with people that are ready to confess and be state witnesses. You take those guys in the meantime.
And I'd like to bring in the former statistician general, Ntate Lehohla, who is, of course, now joining us for this conversation. Ntate Lehohla, we keep on hearing about corruption and just how, this cancer is really eroding public trust and also just sharpening the focus once again to the institutions that are supposed to be dealing with this. But let's look at corruption in and itself. Do you think that apart from, the cases that we are hearing about in the public forum, is it worse than we perceive it to be?
Well, I suppose if you look at the kinds of numbers that we have been producing as Stats SA, such as the growth GDP, you would really suspect that there is something sinister and much deeper at play. And I think the evidence is playing itself out. That there has been a very sinister process that South Africa engaged in, to a large extent very deliberately and purposefully, which is called the corruption project, to line the project's pockets of a few. If you look at from 2009, how wealth distribution jumped from around 60% for the 3.5 million people to now 90% under control of this 3.5 million, you really understand what corruption has done to South Africa to promote and increase inequality, to create joblessness, to disrupt the fiber of society, and to demoralize us and be a deplorable country as we are now, not only in junk, but now with coronavirus, we have sunk to even lower levels, where we have PPE for carrying even at the highest office. That PPE corruption happens in the office of the president. This is absolutely unacceptable, that we have that kind of situation in the country and aggravating the poverty in which we are already. Now, what does that do? And what is being revealed in the Zondo Commission is that there are many copycats now, realizing that people have gone scot-free, as we understand from the Zondo Commission, and they are doing worse, including digging roads, because they have to claim their state, removing the rail lines. All those things are part and parcel at the core of our problem, of a leadership that has delegated its responsibility to corruption.
Ntate Lehohla, I'm going to ask us just to pause there. We are going to be continuing with this discussion, Andile, in just a moment. And just looking at, of course, how do we then, right the wrongs? How do we then begin to fix, what really appears to be broken? And it doesn't look like anybody really is starting to fix it. We'll continue with this conversation after this. We continue our discussion looking at corruption, morality of corruption and the strategies to overcome the rot. And of course, I'm still joined by Statistician General, former Statistician General rather, Andile Nomlala, alongside Black Management Forum President Andile Nomlala. Andile, Nomlala mentioned something very critical before the break, the copycats, because this goes to the heart of accountability. And that's what people have been lamenting, to say that it doesn't look like there's anything or anyone that is being held to account. Certainly copycats is also a problem that we need to be looking out for.
Look, I think what is critical, and we have seen this in the past, where you have to strengthen the ability of the state institutions to actually deal with corruption. But I think as we move into fourth industrial revolution, there are basic things that, we have the central supplier database at the National Treasury. Now, you can't have a municipality in Goango or wherever buying a bottle of water for 10 rands, and another municipality, it's the same government system, buying the same bottle of water for 80 rands. If you had a centralized, controlled procurement portal that could, and you use the fourth industrial revolution, we have big institutions in our country, we have big companies in our country, we have the state that can be capacitated and assisted electronically. It's clear now that we can't trust the individual abilities to curb the scourge of corruption. It's clear now that we have a lot more stringent processes, even, by the way, linking up to government laws. Because how do you have a minister? Ministers and MECs, as far as I understand, they get appointed via an SMS. How then they become accountable for governance processes and operational matters? We have to look at our own laws and see what powers does the politician have on operational activities of a department, a municipality, because without dealing with that, because ministers don't get trained to be municipality managers, but they seem to be having a voice and an authority to how a municipality manager must function. So if we're to deal with those, then we can have a much more better system.
There's something that you've been talking about quite for a while now, and that is, of course, the National Development Plan. And part of what it suggests is, of course, when it comes to dealing with corruption, it's suggesting a multi-agency approach with greater cohesion and coordination that is at present, of course, just to make sure that this is what is needed to deal with corruption. We of course, when you look at what we have been seeing, we've been seeing the SIU making some moves. We've been seeing, some of the agencies already starting to talk a bit tough, but we're still not seeing convictions. When you look at this goal of the NDP in terms of this multi-agency approach, is it something that is currently in full effect? And are we looking at achieving this by 2030?
Well, you see, the project was very deliberate. It started with destroying the scorpions and replacing it with the hawks, and then destroying the institutions of the state. There hasn't been any convincing move to rebuild the institutions of the state. And I think to the extent that that has not been demonstrated, it's very difficult to conclude that we are serious about dealing with corruption. There are cases that should be prosecuted. There is no place for a political party to try and play a prosecutorial role. Secretary General Mantashe, at the time when this corruption was raised, he said people should come and report to him. What kind of law is that? You can't do that. You diluted the essence of the state institutions to prosecute. You need the state institutions to prosecute. Kimi Makwetu had to introduce a new law in Parliament that empowers him to do the prosecution of wrongdoers when there is Parliament that should do that. So instead of addressing these issues, we pile laws and laws and institutions on top of the other. Kimi Makwetu, as an auditor general, has to say, here is wrongdoing. The executing authority, who is the minister, must take that up. If he's not, then Parliament must act on that. Now, how do you give Kimi Makwetu those powers? It's the same as arrogations that political parties assign themselves have to end up being dealt with the judiciary. So the system has collapsed. So we need the rebuilding of the state institutions to take responsibility. It's not putting layers and layers on top of other things. It is actually dealing with the corruption and locking people up. There are prosecutable cases that are very, very obvious at the moment. They haven't been done.
And if we continue on this path, could we then find ourselves with a failed state and an exacerbation of poverty?
Well, exacerbation of poverty is beyond redemption at the moment. COVID-19 has not done us any favors. But Zimbabwe and other failed states didn't wake up failed. But the trajectory that we are facing at the moment, where wanton destruction of property, including people taking shovels and picks to dig up the road, dig up the rail line, to steal electricity, and all those things have to be part and parcel of our rebuilding effort. How are we going to rebuild? I mean, these people are encouraged by the wanton neglect of the government from actually taking the role to prosecute and to get people to where they should actually perform as human beings. We have a long way to go.
And Andile, when one thinks back to the past, former President Jacob Zuma once went to the Northwest in 2009 to inspect a project that was supposed to be a handing over of RDP houses. And a day before he could do that, a storm hit, and those houses were without roofs when he was supposed to now be handing them over on the day. But not far from that particular project, there were rondavels that still had their roofs intact. And then, of course, that led to the former president being angry, saying, calling for accountability. Now, when you look at such examples, because money then had to be spent, especially after people had been paid, money then had to be spent to then fix the roofs of those particular houses. And it's certainly not an isolated incident. We are seeing these where people are paid, but there's still more money that then gets wasted to fix what was actually supposed to have been built.
Bongiwe, it's our responsibility as particularly BMF, PPC, as black business leaders, to bemoan and call upon the black contractors, that some of them, and I'm not saying they're the only ones that are corrupt, but that some of them are given these jobs and opportunities and they mess them up. But what becomes the issue here, by the way, Bongo, is that the real black business people, the people that have built and have a track record, because if you just have, like, let's use the example of PPE, you register a company in March and you are given a 20 million rands contract in July. What is that? What is that? And that person, and these things are used as an empowerment. There's a guy who has been manufacturing the masks and who has built his businesses over time and who's overlooked, and then the fixers and the middlemen, they come in the front. Now, all these manifestations you're talking about are as a result of the core of corruption, because there's a corrupter and the corruptee. And on the other side, the corruptee is the fixer who, let's give an example. The guy has never produced anything, but he's closer to the politician. He sits at home and makes a phone call. And that phone call secures him a tender. And the tender, he then calls another friend, who's also a fixer, to find a supplier. And the supplier then delivers the contract. All the guys work, all his effort in the entire process is to just type an invoice, put an 800% markup, and put 15% VAT, which they also make it as a markup, and send it. And he sits in his bank at home, and 20 million rands chinching in his bank account. And that guy calls himself a business person. And the real black entrepreneurs, people that we know, colleagues, when you get given a contract in a municipality, people know who has been in business, who hasn't been in business. We can even do a local profiling and go and see 3 houses that you've built in the local area. But no one has that patience. Because why? Everybody is in it for the money. And it's started by the politicians and the so-called, and we don't know those people. They are black people who are director generals, who are MECs, who are professionals in an ideal world. But BMF can't stand and defend those crooks. They are not part of us. They are not us. They are crooks that must be dealt with by the law of our country. The patience of the public and the civil society, colleagues, we must not cry when there's shoddy houses. We must cry when we see a contractor that we don't know, a person that we have never seen picking up a brick and never even done his own driveway, uchentibala. but he's been given a contract to build a road. The public, I think, if you go to white suburbs in this country, the accountability is pushed by the people. If there's a pothole in the middle of Sandhurst, one person who drives over that pothole would not end it with the city of Johannesburg. Black people, we need to get to that level. I know that we protest as mass protest in municipalities and everything, but on a daily basis, we must not be reactive. We must be proactive, that whenever there is a sign of mismanagement, a sign of corruption, a sign of ineptitude, we must stand in front of that municipality and stop them from functioning up until they present a case study of where and who went to see what this contractor has done, where.
And Andile Nomlala, there's also another concern, an ongoing concern around state-owned enterprises, some of them that continue to bleed, the national purse dry, and that, of course, having a serious impact on service delivery. When it comes to these particular state-owned enterprises, because some of them, it doesn't even look like they'll ever get things right, what should be done?
Well, there are state enterprises such as Eskom that are too big to fail because they are critical to our energy supply at the moment. And their failure is about management, not about what they should deliver. And those have to be protected. What I'm worried about is the fact that it's being divided into 3 areas of generation, distribution, and the like. This was never a problem of Eskom. The problem of Eskom is poor management and poor corruption, or rather not poor corruption, but corruption. Otherwise, Eskom as an entity that is unified and engineering entity work very well. It's an economic and engineering entity. It's not an accounting entity. And when we try to divide it on the basis of trying to know how money flows, you are destroying its genetic code of delivering electricity. And some of this diagnosis and prognosis and solutions don't actually answer the key problem. The key problem, or rather the key issue around Eskom, is an engineering economic entity. It's a complex entity. When you start separating it, you weaken it and you destroy it. You will not resolve it for purposes of accounting. SAA is a vanity project. You can rent any flight and put a tail on it as a national flag. You really shouldn't be pouring money into that thing again and again every time. The Arms Corps, those are institutions that are very important because the production of ammunition goes to the heart of the engineering requirements of the country. Things like nuclear are very critical because nuclear build means cement, means steel, means all those things, and they can be catalysts for change. So one has to be careful as to which ones have to be selected, isolated, and dealt with a particular line of thought. Let me go back to the issue around the procurement. This is very hurting. The people of Cape Town have this Peter Newzroom, the colored community. They manufacture fantastic costumes. What's a mask? The mask and the PPE, it's absolutely something they could do in their dream. You could actually select those communities and say, produce masks, billions of them for us here in South Africa and for export. But then there's a politician who comes and bribes and destroys all livelihoods and the possibilities of industry. In the US, for instance, during their census now, they actually procured, made tenders, and those tenders were specifically for disadvantaged communities to manufacture masks to get the PPEs. That's how detailed and care is taken for the disadvantaged. In South Africa, it was given to the politician and not the poor. We are in a state that actually is very, very deplorable and uncaring.
And Ntatele Hutla, as a final question from me to you tonight, I'm not sure if you watched the State Capture Commission of Inquiry today. Certainly startling evidence there, hearing the former Human Settlements MEC in the Free State, Bongiwe Zwane, coming out to say that he did not know that there was a Housing Act, and also the fact that there may have been statements that were released during his tenure about hundreds of houses that were handed over to people, but today coming out to say that maybe he could have handed over 50. And that's just, some of the stuff that he told the State Capture Commission of Inquiry today. What do you make of his evidence?
Well, I mean, the government has systems, but those systems were destroyed very badly and undermined governance. This was a deliberate act, and they played in that. Must be in red overalls, orange overalls. There's no need. I mean, he must be prosecuted. There's enough evidence, at least, to put him through the laws. So I agree that the Zondo Commission is very important, and it should continue to do its work. But these two processes are not dependent one on the other. They can run in parallel. Prosecution, sent to prison, come back and be a witness in the Zondo Commission and do all those things. These things must run in parallel and quicker. Because what we are facing with the economy now is level 5 corona equivalent. Although we are saying we are on level 1 corona, it is level 5 corona equivalent as far as the economy is concerned. It requires just as big an emergency. And these people who are working with impunity weaken the possibility of the state to looking at that level 5 corona equivalent in the economy.
And Andile, as a final question from me, do you think, because we've been hearing tough talk, we've been hearing the president coming out talking tough, we've been hearing some of the institutions coming out to say that they are indeed working, do you have confidence that the next time we have a discussion, you and I, we are going to be seeing the needle move even further than it has?
Look, Bongiwe, it's not even a matter of that confidence. I think we can't wait as a civil society. We can't wait as a business organizations. We can't wait as unions, and many South Africans. We mustn't, the state is ours. We appoint people through vote to manage it on our behalf. And when they are not doing what we want, we have no choice but to take them out. That's the first basic thing that we do. But in this instance, when there's an interval between the election periods, the only thing that then as citizens we must do, we must rise up against corruption. Remember, these people live in our own societies. These people are family members. These people are belonging into some community and they have a life and they have the audacity. There's a guy on Twitter who had an audacity to flaunt 5 or whatever expensive cars. He's now answering to the hawks. And we need to be vigilant that way, so that even the state institutions, we had an engagement with the NPA head when we invited her, and she told us the difficulties that she's experiencing at the NPA, but the patience of us having to rely on the state institution is running thin. And we are saying to the president that he must do everything necessary to urgently strengthen the state institutions. We see SARS is coming okay, but the other institutions are still lagging behind. But as much as and as long as they are not ready, South Africans as citizens, let's keep the government accountable with whatever means possible.